Hello and welcome. I'm Bigfoot, and today I'm not faffing around because I've got an experiment set up and I need to get it going because it might take a little while to run. So I'm going to get it going, and now I'm going to take you through what I'm trying to achieve. So the question I'm trying to ask here is how quickly can trains deliver materials? If we change the orientation of trains, so number of locomotives, number of storage carts in that train, how quickly does it deliver those materials? Is it more efficient, less efficient? Well, that's the question I'm trying to ask. So at the bottom, we've got kind of like the benchmarks, what I'm trying to gauge the performance of trains by. So we've got a yellow belt, and we've got a red belt, and we've got a blue belt. So the critical thing with these belts is how long it takes for the first piece of material to arrive. So until this first piece of material arrives at the warehouse at the other end, there's nothing going to be stored. So there's a huge time delay from the moment I get this going, from the first material arriving, and then the storage can start. So these three act as kind of as a basis to rate the trains by. At the bottom, we've got some targets. So these are the amount of time it would take for the amount of material in these warehouses to be delivered if there was no starting gap, if there was no head start. So if we were just delivering these, if we delivering these materials just naturally over from the speed of the belt itself. So in these warehouses, we've got 152,000 ore, maybe a slightly odd number, but I needed it to be divisible by 4 because I've got trains with 2 storage carts, so it needs the amount those can store is 4,000 ore, so the total amount needs to be divisible by that number so that it kind of works out evenly. I have a feeling that at the end I might have to jiggle some stuff around with the ore because it might not work out perfectly, but that's for another moment. So at the bottom here we've got these 3 basic tests just with the conveyor belts. As we work our way up, we've got the first experiment, which is what happens if we change the fuel. So fuel gives us faster trains, makes things happen faster, but the trains ultimately are still they're stationary for significant periods of time. So how much extra speed do we actually achieve from these different fuel types? This is one of the questions I wanted to ask. As we move our way up, so we've got different fuel types here. As we work our way up, these are just normal solid fuel. So any times we achieve from these tests, we can compare back to the solid fuel here, and hopefully by working out how much faster these ones are, we can pro-rata it and work out how much these would be faster with different fuels. So I'm trying to cover all bases. So to start with, we've got a 1 carriage train with 2 locomotives going along a single track. So that'll go back and forth until all of the material has been delivered. We've got a single locomotive with 2 storage carts with a loop. So that will go round. See if that makes any difference. Because obviously the single carriage going back and forth has got a dead locomotive when it's travelling in any direction. So it's dragging weight that has no performance. So by having a loop, we can remove that dead weight. Let's see it, but we do have extra distance as a result of the U-turn. Let's see what happens. It's an experiment. That's what this is for. Then we have 2 locomotives, so locomotive front and back, 2 storage carts. And then at the top, we have an experiment which is trying to determine how much performance benefit we get from having no head start. So when I hit that tick button and got the experiment going, it set the ore off from here. So this belt was empty. When I hit that button, it started it from travelling into the train station. With the one at the top, I wanted to see how much performance benefit could be gained if all of these storage bins were filled to start with. So the train more or less went off straight away, much quicker. So hopefully, again, we can, by finding how long this one takes to come there and back, we can prorata that based on the other. We can prorata that and work out how long it would take if we didn't have a head start with everything else. Although I have a funny feeling that head start one might be such a performance benefit, it might be really overpowered. So that might dictate how fast. That might be so quick that I have to rerun the test and give all of them no head start and see what difference that makes. But that will be more of a confirmation. Well, so that's decision for another moment. In addition, I've nicked my timer from the racetrack. So we've got a little timer so that I know how long the test has been running for and how long and I can then record it and find out how long these trains take. So the track itself is 1,000 tiles. The 1,000 tiles is just for the conveyor belts, because they're my line in the sand. So because the train, the ore for the trains has to come in perpendicular to the train track, I've counted how far this is from the middle of the train track and then moved it forwards. So hopefully, well, this is 14 tiles. So by the time it reaches here, the conveyor belt would have gone the 14 tiles and reached here. So hopefully, I've tried to even it out. I tried to. Everything is judged by the conveyor belts. So that is 14 tiles. So I've moved it 14 tiles forward. So that's why I've got this 14 here. All the way across, I've got 100, 200, etc. And at the end, we have the bins that are collecting the resources. So this is the end stage. So the yellow belt hasn't arrived yet, that's still arriving. Red belt is on its way, blue belt's on its way, everything else should really be on its way. So I've got a stopwatch next to each one, so I'm going to record the time, hopefully, when these fill. This will fill up. When it's full, the last light will light up, so I'll know. So I do have to keep an eye on this. I can't just let it... I haven't set it up so that when this fills, it stops the timer. I don't know how to do that. In fact, comments... Yeah, any help in the comments would be really, really helpful. Because this is something else I was trying to do for my racetrack. I couldn't get it to work. So that's why I've got a timer for each one. Yeah, so clearly no head start is clearly winning at the moment. And I'm just going to let this run. If we go to our targets, you know, I reckon at least an hour. I reckon the first one is going to be about an hour or so before any sort of hard results come in. So let's leave it a little while and see what happens. Okay, so we're just nearing 16 minutes in, and I've noticed a really curious thing. I suppose it kind of illustrates the non-linear nature of something like this. Right, so these are my fuel trains. This is obviously what I'm trying to determine how much faster nuclear fuel is than rocket fuel. But there's a problem in that there's not enough ore built up in the storage chests, so that when the trains arrive, they're limited by how much is being delivered by the conveyor belt. So when these things fill up, they all leave at exactly the same time because because it's being held up by the conveyor belt itself. It's being limited by the conveyor belt. So I'm not going to learn anything from these tests other than how much quicker the last batch of ore is to deliver from here to there. That's all it's going to measure. It's not going to measure anything in between. So in order to work this out, I'm going to need to give it a head start. Oh, that's another thing that I've noticed whilst I'm here and whilst I'm talking. I've got this one wrong, haven't I? Because it's not. I've written it as no head start, but it's actually head start. So yeah, I need to change all of that. But I'll do that off air. This is disappointing, but that's why we do. That's why I do this sort of stuff. Okay, so it's literally moments later. Nothing has really moved. Now that I'm looking for this, now that I've seen this problem, I'm noticing it everywhere. None of this is being right. It empties. So everything is being limited by the conveyor belt. Right. Okay. So I need to stop this experiment because this is not working. I need to go back to the beginning and I need to change it all so that everything has a head start. And maybe I'll make the top one no head start like I originally intended. Well, I didn't intend, but had I originally noted. Right. Okay. Back to the beginning. Okay, we are back some time late, a couple of hours or so. I've had to change a few things. Obviously now that 14 tile offset that I had originally doesn't matter because obviously all of these storage bins are filled. So I've moved it all back so that the centre of the train is lines up with the start point for everything else. But other than that, everything's the same. I'm going to get things going again. Yeah. Everything else is the same. So Let's see what happens. So about 12 minutes in now, just over, and I'm having second thoughts again for the second time. Now obviously at this is the output side of the equation. Obviously I'm not ever going to be able to exceed more than 45 units, because that's what this blue belt is going to govern. I mean, it's the same for all of them. I'm looking at this one in particular, but it's the same for all of them. So no matter how much is brought in, it don't matter, because it's just going to be limited by the amount of ore that can be transported from in this section. It's never going to be more than 45. So, I mean, that it seems to explain why all of these are the same. Obviously, other than one, because that's delivering less. Oh yeah, so that's actually for the one carriage. We're not filling up enough boxes to keep the conveyor belt full. So that actually is determined by something other than the conveyor belt. But all of the other ones, I suppose head start, that's struggling at the other end. Same problem, just at the other end. Yeah. Okay, so I need to do this again. I need to have another little think. I need to increase the capacity out of here. Will 2 belts do it? I think 2 belts will do it. I need 2 belts out of here and into here. Everything else is the same. Just 2 belts, so that this 45 isn't critical. Yeah, that's what I need to do. Okay. Another pause. Okay, so we are back again, and I've upgraded all of this. So these now have 2 outputs into the warehouses. Just for the avoidance of any doubt, I filled it with splitters. Just, never be too sore. Yeah, so that's all sorted. Hopefully no bottlenecks here. Now, whilst I've been on the subject of thinking of things that might also bottleneck, because, this is the 3rd time, let's not do it a 4th. I have also upgraded these, so these now have 2 belts. I know it might not look at it, but this goes to this side. So these 2 warehouses feed this side, and then these 2 warehouses feed down here, and then those feed the trains as before. So I've upgraded all of these, so these have 2 belts into the trains. So this shouldn't bottleneck. And interestingly, it might also mean that this no head start experiment suddenly works, because we're putting in twice as much material, so these boxes might actually start filling up whilst the train is on its journey. But I mean, we're back to where we were at the beginning, which is, this is why I'm doing experiments in the first place, to answer questions like these. So let's get things going. I'm not going to really offer much to the description, because probably said it twice already. So let's just see what happens. So we're just over 17 minutes now, and a few patterns are starting to emerge. And firstly, these upgrades that I've done are working really well. It's able to expel all of the ore. Some of these are even ending before the train arrives. So there we go, completely gone. So that's good. That means that we are now fully testing just the trains and nothing else. I suppose if you want to start getting picky, we're testing inserters, we're testing all sorts. But from a train perspective, the inserters are the same for all of the trains. That doesn't make any difference. I can't individually change the inserters for these. I suppose I could change the stack sizes to make a difference. That's a test I haven't done, actually, to be fair, thinking about it. But I'm not going back. We are where we are. If I need to do another one, then I'll include it. The second thing is that nuclear fuel and rocket fuel are not too far away from each other. I think nuclear fuel is literally just about to take over rocket fuel for the first time. It's taken nearly 20 minutes. They are very, very tight. I mean, what is the speed difference? So vehicle top speed is the same, but vehicle acceleration is significantly more. I'm still interested to know what the difference between those two are going to be. Well, we need some more time to pass, so let's skip forward a bit. Okay, so it's been a few days since I last played around with this. It's going to seem like an imperceptible cut. It's just going to be immediate. But from my perspective, it's been a few days. I've been thinking about what it is that I've been trying to achieve with this thing. It's a tricky one to describe. What I was trying to I mean, I started out with the description that I was aiming for, which was that I wanted to try and compare everything back to what the conveyor belts. So how much faster was a train than a conveyor belt? Was it comparable to a red belt? What I actually didn't appreciate was how fast these trains actually are. I don't think these benchmarks are going to be relevant. The trains themselves are going to be a lot quicker. So they're here, they're still going, but I'm paying less attention to them. I'm just more or less ignoring them now. They're still part of the experiment, but I'll still record them just in the same way. But yeah, they're not really relevant. I think the trains are just much faster. The other thing is I've had to run through the test several times because I've had several little problems. I've had a few inserters not working right. I've had a train that wasn't set up perfectly. It was on automatic. No, it was on manual instead of automatic, so I didn't start the test and then I didn't save it. In addition, I've also added some more tests. So I'm not doing the inserter test that I speculated about in the last bit. That didn't seem relevant. But what I have done is created longer tests. So what we now have is the same experiment, just with 2,000, 3,000 and 4,000. Let me just pop that one in there while we're here. There we go. Just to see what the speed difference is over longer distances. So I've started the test again, for hopefully the final time, but you just never know. Let's just see how things pan out. So this experiment has caused a bit of an existential crisis for me. The way I build my train networks are more or less like an open network. Like the trains can decide where they want to go. There's plenty of tracks available. There's a dedicated station for them, input and output. So I just want them to get from A to B. There's no other trains that use those stations. It's just there for each individual train. So the only time that these trains can be stationary in my ideal world is when they're at a station. That's the only time I want them to be stationary. I don't want them to be jamming up and blocking. So the overall philosophy is to provide plenty of routes so that these trains can maneuver around each other. That's the idea. So if I have train blockages, and then the solution is to create more routes. That's my go-to. And the whole reason for this is because, when I was working on the smaller bases, the train networks, they worked fine. These open networks, they work brilliantly. It's only been once I've moved towards these SPM bases where the train network has really kind of fallen apart. And it seems to come down to the trains themselves. Like they don't choose a route based on what is on the train tracks. They just choose the quickest route. So even though I provided all these secondary routes and other routes for them to go round, they don't use them. They just go the same route, and so you find that they logjam anyway because all the trains are using the same track. So that's what this that's what this experiment has caused. That's why I've been away for a few, thinking about what it is that I'm trying to achieve, because the way that I design my bases is with a specific limit on how much these storage carts can deliver, and it seems to be that they can deliver much more than I've allowed for. So I'm just starting to look at the train networks. Do I need to think about different ways of arranging them? Do I need to set aside do I need to have a specific network for like iron ore, so that all of the iron ore trains You know, do they need a specific network? But then I'm also at some point those rail networks are going to have to cross, and I don't have access to tunnels or bridges, so I can't. They're still going to have to interact with each other at some point. They're still going to. And there's the other thing to consider is that these SPM bases that I've built, these 2,000 SPM bases, the game can't. The game can't. The game can't do it. The game really struggles to process all of that stuff going on. So where I'm actually ending up is, you know, the small bases, that's really what Factorio is for. The game can't handle these big bases. And if I'm only doing small bases, then do I really need to worry about these decisions that I'm having? Because, you know, in these other small bases that I've made, these train networks work fine. And ultimately, they come down to how much ore can be delivered to a train at any one moment. You know, there's only so much ore you can take out of a patch of ore on the ground at any, you know, over a duration of time. You're only going to be able to fill a certain amount of trains. It's really caused me to think about how I arrange stuff, but then also go directly back to the beginning and say I don't need to think about it, because these SPM bases, they don't work. They're not much fun to build. They're a complete pain. I mean, it's broken me. Building these 2,000 SPM bases was broken a little part of me in Factorio. It's why I've been away for a few months. I've had to go away and find something else. So anyway, that's why I wasn't quite sure whether pursuing this experiment was worthwhile. But I am where I am. I've built it all. I may as well finish it. You know, there's no harm that can happen by finishing it, coming to some sort of conclusion, reaching some sort of numbers that I can then at least look at and maybe think about a bit more and see if there's an actual conclusion, an actual outcome to this experiment that means something. Hey, maybe it's helpful to you. Maybe it's not maybe it's less helpful to me, and maybe it's more helpful to you. Who knows? Yeah, so I'm gonna have a little think whilst this fills up, and then we'll work out some times and get this thing finished once and for all. Right, so we're about to get our first finisher here, which looks like it's going to be nuclear fuel. Second place looks like it's going to be 2 locomotives with a U-turn. Yeah, this should tick over in a moment. What's it going to be? $32. Okay, well, that's annoying. That should have gone green. There we go. Yeah, very, very close behind. Very close. $33.21. And there's rocket fuel, $33.33. 36.1. $39.4. There seems to be a minor discrepancy. Blue Belt's just about to come in. Now, I did these predictions right at the beginning before I did the test. Just wanted to see what happened. And it's based on how long it takes for the first bit of resource to arrive, and then 45 units after that. Oh, here we go. What's it going to come out as? 59.45. So that's 40 odd seconds more. 59 than I thought it was going to be. Now, I've run a stopwatch next to my timer, and it seems to be that the game is running just a little bit fast. I don't know what equals a second anymore. So what I'm going to have to do is wait for the red belt to come in, compare it to my prediction, and see if it's a discrepancy in the game. Is that something I'm going to have to play around? Am I going to have to readjust all of my values to account for the game time. That would be really annoying. Okay, so red belt's 88.56. Red belt's kind of hit me by surprise there. I was expecting it to be like, well, this one's the blue belt was 40%, was 40 seconds longer, and the red belt should be an extra 50% of time. So that's be an extra minute over my prediction, but it's not. It's still only 20 seconds. That has thrown me for a complete loop. This is the other thing. So these inserters are picking up materials I don't want to pick up. I want those materials to be in here, and then the lights will go green. Okay. So next. There's not many left actually. Oh, just one more. 4,000. Where are you? Oh, no, that's coming out. I've had actually some issues with the right amount of materials finding its way onto the train and then waiting around for a little while. Pooh, I think that's exactly what you've done. $91.9. Take that one with a slight pinch of salt. It could have been sat there for a little while. The experiment isn't perfect, I'll be honest. I didn't set it up perfectly. It's not run perfectly. I mean, all of these numbers that I'm coming up with, I'll go through them in a bit later, but all of these numbers I'm coming up with are all going to be should be treated with a heavy pinch of salt. You know, these are very specific conditions I've set up here. I have no idea whether these are actually achievable in real life. You know, in a real proper factory where you've got, I just wanted to come up with something so I could compare, so I could see. So, yeah, that 4,000 one, that was a little bit loose, and I may have lost a bit of time, but overall, hopefully, it's going to be in around that ballpark. Anyway, so that's the last one, other than the yellow belt. But I'm happy. I don't think I need to wait another hour to get that one to come through. I mean, it's not even an hour; it's like an hour and a half. So I'm not going to wait for the yellow belt. As I said, I'm happy with the experiment. And these weren't really useful anyway, in the end. Although they did help me to find out the time, but that hasn't actually helped me resolve the issue. Anyway, let me do some maths and let's come back with some conclusions. Right, so conclusion time. Firstly, here we have the various different fuels and the numbers that they achieved. So nuclear fuel achieves 38.9 ore per second per storage carriage on the train, etc. down the page, and then the big numbers next to the fuel types, they're kind of a ratio. So wood fuel went 10% slower than solid fuel, rocket fuel went 17% faster than solid fuel, and then nuclear fuel went 20% faster than solid fuel. So everything is related back to solid fuel. The idea being that all the other experiments have been done using solid fuel, so any of the experiments you should be able to get an extra 17% less time, something like that, or 20% less time for the rocket fuel and the nuclear fuel. If you did the same experiment again and changed the fuels, those should be the ratios that you'd be able to achieve on the other experiments that I've done. That's the idea between testing these different fuel types. So, I mean, I suppose the first thing to notice is that there's only a 3% extra fuel efficiency between switching from rocket fuel to nuclear fuel, which, you know, you actually get, you know, there's a significant amount of acceleration difference between these two, like 250% vehicle acceleration versus 180, but in the real world, you know, you only seem to get a very small increase, although both are significantly better than either of these two at the bottom. So that's one clear conclusion at least. Second thing I would point out is that the no head start, that's where the input chests start off empty, whereas all the other chests have started up full. The no head start is only about 5% loss. It's only about 5% slower than the equivalent. So, although I mean, it's worthwhile noting, but you know, over the infinite time, that will be zero. So it's only a starting condition. It's not probably relevant in the larger scheme of things, but it is kind of nice to know. The second kind of surprising thing was that the one carriage was actually better than the two carriage version. That would kind of surprise me a little bit. I had to run the maths twice just to make sure I'd got it right, but it turns out that one carriage is almost, you get about 7 or 8% faster by doing one carriage than you would with the two carriage. So anyway, that's nice to know. I just want to jump in here with a little post edit. What that experiment actually shows is that if you had two train tracks with a single lane carriage on each, it would be slightly faster than if you had one train track with a single train with two storage carts. That's what it actually shows. It shows that you would actually have to have double the one carriage track in order to achieve that efficiency, that level of performance. It's not quite as clear cut because it's per carriage. So because the one carriage took less than double the amount of time, it works out more efficient. It's tricky. Maybe it might be a little bit tricky to get your head around. And then the final thing, I mean, this is probably where things start getting important for me personally, is because I tend to assume, or I have done up to this point, I've tended to assume an average amount of ore that a storage carriage on a train can provide my base with. I've always assumed a value of 20, or at least 18 to 20. So, it does seem to make sense with the smaller bases. So I've got 3,000 and 2,000 here, both of which the base would be quite happy and achievable with the train layouts I've done up to now, assuming that the trains don't get jammed on the network, assuming that everything kind of is able to run from A to B without obstruction. Then the 2,000 and 3,000 distances would seem to work with my averages that I've used up to now, but the 4,000 wouldn't. So if I started to create much bigger bases with this, I suppose not necessarily bigger bases, but more kind of train orientated bases with ore resources much further away from the center of the base, then I might start needing to worry about using a smaller number. So that it's useful to know, and I know that last one is a little bit fudged because I didn't get the experiment right, but it was, as I was checking it, it was slower than the red belt. The red belt was filling up faster than it. And I went immediately from the red belt to here. So it could only have been a momentary lapse. The numbers make sense. You know, we've gone from 22.1 to 17.1, which is a big gap, and then we've gone from 17.1 to 13.9, which is a smaller gap. The numbers make sense to me anyway. So that's probably it. I mean, the experiment is done. I'm fairly happy with the results. I'm actually much happier with the results than I was a few hours ago whilst I was kind of in my existential crisis. It's actually worked out useful. I'm pleased. I hope it's been useful for you. Okay, great. Till next time.